welcome. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what brings you here.
Well, thanks for having me. First of all, it's great to be here. My name is Dr. Kim Van Dusen, and I am a mom of two. I feel like most importantly, that's always where I start. And I just love being a mom. And through that process and journey, I also received my doctorate in psychology about 15 years ago. And I've been in private practice ever since as a licensed child therapist, primarily a registered play therapist, and work actively in play. And started a company through that called The Parentologist, which is pretty much about everything family and parenting with a therapeutic twist. So I have my own blog, I have my own podcast called The Parentologist Podcast, and I have a book deal that I'm in the process of finishing up writing, and it'll be on bookshelves in May of 2026. And it's all about parenting through play. So very excited about that as well.
Congratulations,
Thank
having
you.
birthed that baby a couple of times, so you know what it takes. So
Yes.
it's an accomplishment,
Thank
and I
you.
am thrilled to be with you talking about play because it's one of my favorite topics. And when I first started coaching, I was doing workshops on the power of play.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of play therapy.
Wonderful.
So let's talk about kids with ADHD and play. Why is it particularly important for this community?
I can't say enough good things about play. Obviously, you're an advocate of it. And, for a living, I actually live and breathe it, not just with the children, but also with the parents, and specifically in the ADHD community. And so, I would say that, play activates the brain and it releases dopamine, first of all, which can improve mood, it improves focus, and it makes activities more rewarding and a little more fun for children who need that extra stimulation, that extra sensory driven environment. And so, play is a way that they can express themselves, whether it be their emotions or just even how they're feeling behaviorally in a safe environment, in a non judgmental environment, and a way for them to do that without having to talk. A lot of children, and even younger and older children of many ages, don't just want to sit down and talk about what's going on. If something's bothering them, sometimes they don't have the speech and language skills. Sometimes they're nonverbal. Sometimes they just don't want to. Sometimes they just want to express themselves through play. So it enables them to have that environment to express themselves without actually having to talk. Some of my client sessions, we don't talk at all. And, for some people, that might be anxiety provoking because, you want to talk and you want to see what's going on. And I think as parents or adults, sometimes we forget about that play is really a child's language. And so, having the opportunity to, build communication skills, build decision making skills, critical thinking skills, social skills are all done through play. And that's how children conceptualize their world. And so that's why it's so important for kids, especially with ADHD, who tend to struggle with sometimes communication skills, social skills, etc.
Before we go on with this session, I just wanted to remind you that you can still upgrade to the Summit's VIP Pass. Besides the lifetime access to all the sessions, you also get the audio files, you get the workbook for each session, you get the expert action blueprint with key takeaways from each masterclass, you get the English subtitles, and really a bunch of other things that will save you tons of time and really make a huge difference with your kid and with your family relationships. So if you're a busy parent and you want to get the most out of the summit, then I really encourage you to find the button somewhere on this page and go check it out. You can still get access at a discounted price before our summit ends. And now let's get you back to the program.
Yeah, well, and learning is also
Sure.
really compound. Play in the school environment can be so powerful for our kids. And yet
Exactly.
there's this kind of there's this notion that play, once we get to school, kids are supposed to be serious, and that play is a childhood thing, and as we grow up and mature, we're supposed to be more serious, right?
Right.
There's this almost demonizing of play, and really what you're saying is play is a vehicle for our kids for their growth and their development and their emotional maturation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what happens when you've got kids with ADHD in particular? Sometimes you have kids who have maybe struggles with control issues, think we see that a lot, whether there's defensiveness or having a hard time hearing the word no or having a hard time accepting when it doesn't go their way. Talk a little bit about what happens. What are some of the challenges that ADHD kids face in play?
What I see most is, especially in a child environment, especially in schools, like I said, playing with other kids, other peers their age, specifically, is wanting it their way and being rigid in their play and wanting to have control over not just what they're playing, but what the rules look like. And then even maybe manipulating the rules as they go. So it fits, what's in their brain of how it should be. And being able to work with a child to have some more flexibility in their play and allow them to be a part of that process, and then also teach them to take turns, which play can do, to take turns, to be patient, especially when that impulsivity starts coming out, and being able for them to take a step back and you know um, whether it's role playing, fantasy play, which are really great for children with ADHD. It gives them the authority and the autonomy to create play that they like and that they want, but then also be able to be open to hearing others' feedback. Because I think I see, or what I see happening a lot in schools, especially, is children with ADHD specifically might feel more isolated because they'll come to me and they'll say, no one likes me, no one wants to play with me because, they say, that, they don't want to play my games, or I don't have any friends and things like that. And I dig a little deeper and I say, well, why is it that you don't have any friends to play with? And they say, well, I don't want to play what they're playing. And I was like, oh, okay. That gives a little more insight of, it's not like they wouldn't have friends, but they specifically are rigid in the fact that they don't want to play what the other kids are playing and therefore feel left out, because it's not their way. And so being able to teach them those skills and those social skills and communication skills, to be able to have that flexibility really helps them be able to make more friends and feel more confident in their play with their peers, because they're able to, again, take turns and hear from other people and other peers on what they want to do too, and be able to compromise a little bit more.
So there's this opportunity to teach them and to teach them compromise skills and turn taking and all of those things we want our kids to be able to do. And full disclosure, when one of my kids was little, I actually in the summer hired a graduate student for 2 weeks to do what was called Kim Camp. But the truth is that her job was to put my son in positions where he had to hear the word no or the rules didn't go his way, and it was kind of building that tolerance,
Right.
uh, right, in a fun way. But so talk a little about what happens when kids kind of push back on parents. They're trying to help their kids stretch these limits, and then the kid gets mad at the parent because it's not going their way. Speak to that a little bit.
Right. It is hard. And I think for parents to have a certain level of expectations and prepare themselves emotionally and mentally that might happen, that power struggle, that pushback may be inevitable if they do that. So, for example, I'll see this a lot when parents and children are playing a board game, for example, and the parent wins and the child doesn't. Now, some parents will say, well, I don't want to deal with the tantrum. I don't want to deal with the meltdown. I'm going to let my child win just so I don't have to, have the ramifications of my child losing. And then some parents will say, I want to teach my child that they can't always win and that's going to happen. And better to do it with me than maybe someone at school, where they're in a safe environment with their caregiver, versus a child that may not have mercy on them, and really teach them to be a sore loser, if you will, and doing that in a compassionate way and building empathy, even of saying, well, what did it feel like to lose? Or what did it feel like to watch me win? And really building it from an empathy perspective. And like I said, being prepared. Your child will not like it. If they are a child who likes to win and they don't win, over time, they'll be desensitized to that. But at the beginning is going to be a struggle. And I think if parents just know that off the get-go, I urge parents not to be scared to let themselves win and their child lose just because they're scared of, like I said, the feedback from them. But It won't be easy at first, but as time goes on, it's really beneficial for the parent child relationship and also the child to be able to function in the real world where things aren't always going to go their way. And again, to do that in a safe environment with their caregivers, it's going to be difficult possibly, but more important in the long run. So just stick with it and, just keep going, and it'll be a good life lesson in the long run.
And model being a and model the
Yes.
way that you want, right? Model being a good winner,
Yes.
and as well as as a good loser can really go a long way. So what
Exactly.
about other kinds of play like puppetry or role playing? A lot of our kids like to do that.
Yeah.
How can parents use that?
Puppets are one of my favorite things to use in the playroom. They really are. And another one too that I know we probably weren't prepared to talk about is but sand tray, and just letting and you can do it through puppets too, but really just letting children tell their own story through a character. And again, role playing is really important with many children, and specifically in the ADHD community. Because, like I said, children like to be in control of the play. So, I was taught by a man named Gary Landreth, who's kind of a pioneer of play therapy, and he was very led by child-led therapy. So, letting the child to have control, because in the playroom, because a lot of times kids don't have control in anything else in their lives, right? They're told what to do by their parents, their teachers, their coaches, all of the adults in their life tell them what to do all the time. So the
Sun up,
playtime,
your sun down, right?
yes. Yes, and the playtime is really the only time they somewhat have control over what happens in their life. Even if it's just imaginary play, that's when they have control. So, bringing out the puppets and having the puppets ask the question, even in a fun voice, the more you can animate it, the better. The kids love that. But, having a puppet to almost remove yourself as, let's say, the parent when you're playing with your child, have the puppet do the work, have the puppet ask the question, okay, well, what do you want to play with today? And have the child, have a little authority, a little autonomy, a little control, a little agency on what they're actually playing, and doing it through the puppet. So that removes you. That removes you emotionally as the parent to not take things personally. If the child says, I don't like the way you're playing, and then, you might get upset too. And, you might get dysregulated a little bit because your child's really rejecting your kind of play because they want to be in control. But if you take yourself out of that and make the puppet the main figure in the play session, then it's playful and it speaks to your child, but it also lets them have a little more control over the situation and what's happening in that play scenario.
Yeah. So we're talking about control, and that makes me think about perfectionism. Are there ways that perfectionism might show up in a way a child plays that you might recognize that parents would benefit from knowing?
Yeah, perfectionism, children I think children ultimately want to please their parents. I think they want to do the best they can, whether it's subconscious or or consciously just trying to do their best. And I think they want to, like I said, have control over their environment. And when they don't, they push harder at trying to get that outcome, which makes them look like perfectionists. So if they're not getting their blocks right and they're trying to build this tower that they've pictured in their head is this, this beautiful tower that they've concocted in their brain, and they can't seem to build it and construct it the way that their brain's telling them to. And let's say the blocks fall, or they're having trouble, they may get, their frustration tolerance is going to be low, so they're going to keep trying to build it and build it to make it quote unquote perfect. And there may not be such a thing, they may not get there. And so I think if a parent is aware that their child is a child who is striving for that perfect play scenario, that perfect block structure, whatever it is they're working on, I think that if they're able to somewhat step in and maybe just say, hey, can I help you? Or can I play with you and maybe help the child? It'll let them know that they're not alone. It'll let them know that in a world where they grow up, let's say, and they're trying to get perfect grades and different things, that sometimes if you ask for help, it will actually get better than them trying to do it all on their own. And the burden isn't only on themselves. So if they learn that through play at an early age, it actually helps them as they developmentally grow. So you don't see that show up, like I said, when it comes to, let's say, getting better grades, when they're older, and just saying, kind of some affirmations of it's okay that it didn't work out this time. We'll try again next time. I'm huge into growth mindset. So, you didn't build that block that block tower that you wanted yet, but let's try again tomorrow. And really letting them know that it's okay to fail sometimes because next time you can try again and maybe you'll get that outcome you want the next time, but it's okay that it didn't happen this time.
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot of ways that parents go about having conversations about perfectionism, challenging it, looking at excellence versus perfect.
Right.
Are there any I don't risk isn't the word. Any gaps or anything that parents should watch out for to maybe not do?
I think that if a parent notices a child speaking poorly of themselves, I'm a failure, I'm a bad child, I can't do anything right, and they hear that really negative self-talk over and over and over again, it becomes chronic. I believe that should be a red flag. That should be the light bulb that goes off in parents' heads of saying it, just because one thing happened, it happened once, and kids are resilient and they move on from it after a few hours or something. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the chronic negative self-talk about themselves. I think if parents start seeing that, that's a huge red flag that they can look out for, and then they can intervene, at that time appropriately on maybe getting further help, like someone like myself or you, but as a therapist, professional help to try and help their children through that. But I think that would be the first red flag I would look out for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to say to those parents listening that when you hear a kid who has that tendency towards negative self-talk, it can be really scary,
Yes.
especially a really young kid. When you hear a kid say, "I don't deserve," I'm not, I'm not good enough. I'm so like when they internalize it, it can be very scary. And so, really getting some support and some help to understand how do you begin to redirect that can be really powerful for a parent.
Right.
Do you have a favorite way to respond to it?
I'm thinking, I always wonder sometimes with these questions, do I respond as a mom or a therapist? Because I feel like sometimes it can be a little different. I'm big into positive talk. I'm big into positive encouragement. I try to find the silver lining in most things I do, just in general in my life, and as a mom. So I'll usually be the one that reminds my child. Well, first and foremost, I should step back a moment and say that when a situation like this comes up, I think the biggest things to remind parents of is to show empathy and validation. Validate that child's emotions. I know this is really tough for you, and I'm so sorry you're feeling this way. And then, moving on to let's try together tomorrow to find something that is going your way. Like let's tomorrow, let's look for the glimmers. Let's look for the positive things that are going on in your life. Let's find some, or even let's like if the child's in the mood, and depending on their age, let's make a list right now of some things you're really good at. Again, going back to that growth mindset.
But I want to really emphasize because you didn't start there. You started by acknowledging and validating what the child is feeling. And so you're not saying don't feel that way, let's look for the positive. You're saying, "Wow, you feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're feeling that way."
Yeah. And maybe even sitting in it for a while. You don't have to find the solution in the moment. I think a lot of parents feel that pressure because they get anxious that, oh, my child's upset. And as parents, we don't like to have our kids in pain. That doesn't feel good to us. And so, because of our, let's say, anxious response and us feeling the pain our child is feeling, that makes us want to act in the moment and fix it and make it better. And sometimes sitting in it and just sitting with your child while they're crying or if they're in a bad mood, wait till the next day maybe to make that list or something like that. But absolutely the biggest part and the biggest takeaway is that validation piece.
Yeah, you just can't emphasize that enough. The other thing I used to do, particularly with one of my kids, and this is not an everyday kind of a thing, but occasionally when it was really at that point was to say, you can't talk to my kid that way,
Yeah.
right? To defend my child in that third person in a way that had them go, oh, right.
Yeah.
I'm not just me. I'm your kid, and you don't see me that way. Right,
I
and
love
sometimes
that.
that can be a very powerful way to kinda shift it, but again, you don't wanna use it all the time. none of these things. If anything overused
Of
becomes
course.
tuned out, right?
Right.
Anything else that might build language, build resilience?
I just think, and one thing I work with a lot is positive behavior support interventions. It's an evidence based program that fits really well with play and play therapy and solutions focused therapy, which is a little bit based on what my book's going to be about. Those three evidence based programs, but noticing when your child is doing something right, noticing when your child is on task, noticing when your child is focused on, let's say, doing their homework. I feel like sometimes, when parents have low frustration tolerance, or when they are overwhelmed, overstimulated, dysregulated, they'll start focusing on when their child is doing something wrong, which only makes that problem worse, if you will. So, really noticing if your child, let's say, doesn't sit well at the dinner table for more than 5 minutes without having to get up and dance around between bites, which I see a lot of happening, with children. Parents saying, sit down, sit down, sit down, because in their mind, a good child sits down. And I think that's just kind of culturally in a society what we're taught, even in a classroom, teachers, if your child is walking around, they're disruptive, they're not sitting down, there's something wrong, like they're a problem in the classroom, right? So I think first and foremost, instead of looking at those behaviors, looking about when your child is doing it well, you know, yeah, like even if it's just 2 minutes, great. You just sat down in your chair for 2 minutes. That's awesome. Give me a high five, give them a little squeeze, a little hug, and saying, wow, I'm so proud of you. You sat in now let's try maybe for 2.5 minutes and kind of make it into like a competition or a game to see if they can beat their time of sitting in the chair, or something like that. Or, even homework breaks and things like that. Like sometimes I tell parents, when they can't sit very long and do their homework between each problem, get up and run around, the kitchen island or something, do 10 jumping jacks, make it fun and make it playful, even in things like doing homework, like chores, like sitting at the dinner table, because that is really hard for some children. And instead of reprimanding them for it, find their strength and make it playful and make it where that's something they're going to enjoy and feel good about versus feeling bad about, going to the dinner table and then dreading it because, oh, I'm just going to get in trouble again for standing up, and kind of making a shift there.
In a way. I mean, we used to have a chin-up bar on outside their bedrooms, and then we had a hopper at the dinner table. So that I had 3 kids, so they had to take turns. But somebody every night got to be the hopper, which meant their job at the dinner table was to get up a lot.
I love that. I love that.
Perfect, right? And then they would fight over who got to the job of being the hopper, right? So
Yeah.
not fight, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So the idea here is to play with it, right? Is to
Yes.
hold it lightly, to play with it, to look for what's working, and to lean into that. Um, and sometimes parents do get frustrated.
Sure.
Maybe they're getting frustrated because they're worried. Maybe they're getting frustrated because they don't enjoy play as much. I have a lot of parents I know in my community who's like, it's this, what they consider fun is not what I consider fun. And so what's your wisdom for how we help parents continue to show up compassionately when without faking it, right? So authentically, but when either they're not into the play that their kids into, or they're frustrated or worried, when their emotions are making it hard to be present.
That's very difficult. And I think there's a lot of guilt that comes with that for a lot of parents, that if they don't like play or don't like the kind of play their child wants to play, that they find guilt. And then that compounds, all the issues. So first and foremost, I usually always, when I work with parents, remind them that they need to be regulated before their child can be regulated. So if they need to take a break, if they need some fresh air, if they need to go stretch, go take a walk in the neighborhood, change of environment, whatever the case may be, to do that first. And if they're not there, and then to tell their child, if their child's asking them to play, say, you know what, give me 10 minutes. And then intentionally, mindfully take that break, get your mind back to where it needs to be, take a few deep breaths, and then you might actually be in a better place than you were 10 minutes ago, even 5 minutes ago. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of self-care. So first and foremost, I suggest that, to maybe get in a better headspace. Secondly, I actually created a lot of content around this on social media a while back because I get asked this all the time, especially, some of the moms that I've worked with before will say, I'm just, my mental load, there's so much going on in my life. By the end of the day, I'm so exhausted. I'm so overwhelmed. I have to cook dinner. I have to do the laundry. And there's just so much on their plate. And they'll say, and this goes for any caregiver, and they'll say, the last thing I want to do is play with my child. I can't just sit there and, play. And so I came up with a way, and I share this on my blog too, but with a couple ways that parents can engage with their child in play where they don't really have to do much at all. So I'll just share one example is a spa. So that's my favorite way to do it. My daughter loves it. And a lot of kids love it. I see the smile on your face. So you know it's going to work. And you've probably done it too. But you lay on the couch or the bed or the floor, wherever you want to be. You lay back, you close your eyes. Maybe, sometimes we even cut cucumbers and actually, put them on my eyes, or she'll turn the lights off or, down. She'll put some, quiet music on or some spa music on, through Alexa or through YouTube or wherever. And you can just lay there, and then my son or my daughter will brush my hair, or they'll give me a hand massage, or whatever the case may be. Right, and they're quote unquote playing spa and they love it. Now sometimes they do want to turn, so then you have to reverse it, which that can be tough. That can, if you're really tired, but it still gives you a chance to relax where you really don't have to do much. That goes for playing doctor too. A lot of times you can lay there and you have a little doctor kit, and they take your blood pressure and get their stethoscope and listen to your heart, and but you can still lay there, but you're still playing, but it's not building blocks sitting on the floor. It's not going back and forth having monologue with two dolls or something like that. So it can work. You just have to get a little creative about it and think outside the box of how can I make this work even though I'm very exhausted. And sometimes that invigorates you and gives you a little more energy. So
I was gonna say, and the connection just is so lovely there that that's gonna bring a little joy, I think. So let's
exactly.
talk a little bit. We've been talking mostly about play, not exclusively about younger kids, but a lot of it. As kids start to get older, they don't stop playing; it just changes shape. I will say we probably start judging it more as they get older, we adults. But now they're having friends and sleepovers and social groups and friend groups, and um, a lot of neurotypical kids may start moving into this more naturally than kids with ADHD. Talk a little bit about what happens as kids become preteens and teenagers in terms of play.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there is that I think, like I said, based on where we are in our society and what play is appropriate, like what we think play should be, is not what it, is always. So I think we somewhat even subconsciously push kids to, well, you're this age, so that's not appropriate anymore type things. And I think in some ways that can be true depending on the situation. But I think just letting kids just express themselves wherever they're at. And again, just because they're a certain age doesn't mean that they're developmentally that age either. Their developmental stage could be completely different than their actual physical age, right? So I think, knowing where your child is developmentally is even more important than the actual age that they are. And then, giving space for play, because sometimes I think kids feel the pressure to grow up too fast these days, especially with social media and a lot of the pressures that they get. My daughter started middle school this year, so I know exactly where this is at right now. And she's always torn between, a lot of her friends are into makeup now and, going on social media, doing all these things. And she's like, but mom, I'm not ready yet. Like, I just want to go to the park and play with her little brother, and do fun things like that. And I said, that's okay. You can do that, or, you can have both. Both can be true at the same time. You can kind of, but she's right in the middle of that stage. And so I just give her space to when she does want to play. Like the other day, she asked me to play Barbies or something. And I just said, sure, let's do it. And then 2 hours later, she wanted to read Harry Potter. And, it was like very, kind of, but play just looks a little different, like you said. And it might look like less playing with Barbies and more playing board games or playing video games, but kids still want to connect. I know we talked about that, about the connection piece a few minutes ago, but kids just want to connect with you. So, you know, just finding something that they like that can be playful doesn't mean just sitting on the floor and playing like maybe they used to, but it means they still want to connect with you in a playful, fun way. And so finding what works and what that looks like for your child, depending on their age, I think is, and just being open to it, I think is the biggest thing.
Well, and what I hear you saying is it's really important for us not to put our stuff on it, right? You're 10, you should be. You're 14, you should be. Like if you got a 14-year-old who's developmentally more like a 11 or 12-year-old and still wants to play like 11 or 12-year-old, I say enjoy it while it lasts,
Exactly, exactly.
you
Yes,
know? Because they do grow up really fast in this world and they have so much exposure to the outside world in so many ways that any opportunity to let them be kids for as long as they can is an opportunity we don't want to miss.
100%.
Let's talk a bit about friend groups. This is something that's developed, and I remember starting to watch it happen as my kids are now young adults. The greatest gift they ever gave me was a number of years ago when they looked at us and they said, Mom, Dad, y'all grew a friend group. I was, yes, this is what we want. We want our family to become one of their friend groups.
Yes.
But it's really important for them to begin to reach out, seek out, identify with other kids, and create groups of friends that they can relate to.
Right.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think fostering peer friendships is very important. It's very important. I think play looks differently for a parent-child relationship and then a peer relationship. It looks very differently, and so encouraging those relationships is very important, especially as the child grows. I think even as when they're very little too. Joining those mommy and me toddler groups and things like that, and of course as they go, into middle school, let's say encouraging them to join a club at school, maybe a book club or a leadership club or a photography club or whatever it is, whatever interest they have, to find peers that have similar interests to themselves. I think that is very important. It helps them have a sense of belonging. It gives them agency to feel more like they're contributing something to society. And I think, once they develop those relationships, it goes beyond even the club or whatever they're in. And they're going to want to, like, hey, do you want to hang out on Friday night? Like, we're all going to the movies. And, oh, sure. It helps them again build on those social skills, build on the communication skills, decision making skills, things like that, as they grow. Like I said, play will look different as they grow, but they're still, when they're still having their hangouts instead of their play dates, it's still a sense of play. It's just looks a little bit different because they're older.
Yeah. So what happens for our kids when this notion of belonging is like a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, it's this incredible sense of here I found my people, I belong to something, and then sometimes with our kids, it can become a dependent on their friends,
Yeah,
or there's an awkwardness. I mean, there's teenage dynamics. They happen, right? So
of course. I think it all comes back to values, and especially family values. Teaching your kids to live by their values. We have this conversation a lot, in the home and in my office with my clients is, well, what's important to you? Does this fit with your values? Like, just because your friends are doing it, do you do it too? It's that old saying, if your friends jump off a bridge, are you going to do the same thing? I still remember my dad telling me that, and I'm obviously a grown adult, but I can't get that out of my head. And just, being able to instill the values of, let's say the importance of sleep. Let's just use that as an example. If their kids are going to a slumber party and a lot of other kids want to stay up till 2, 4 in the morning, that child needs to make a decision. Okay, sleep is important to me. If I don't get sleep, I'm going to be grouchy the next day. I have a baseball game and, I'm not going to play well, or, whatever the ramifications are of that decision. I think, having open conversations with your children all the time of, well, what's a decision you want to make, and letting them know that saying no is okay, and letting them, push back on that sometimes, and being an independent thinker is okay. And that's very hard to do. And I know that firsthand, and I see it firsthand, not only when I was growing up, but with my kids now. And it is hard, but I think just letting them know that they're still accepted, and that no matter what they decide, that they're at least able to see both sides of the coin, I think is important. Because I think sometimes kids get that tunnel vision, like, well, I have to do this because, so and so will be disappointed, or I might get kicked out of this friend group. And it's like, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario if that happens? If they do kick you out of the friend group, then what? Do you have other friends you can hang out with? Or, and really kind of just role playing different sides of the coin to let them know that it's not devastating. It's not the end of the world if they don't get invited to that party, or if they can't go to that specific event, or whatever the case may be. Just being able to role play different scenarios and outcomes of how their decisions will play out, I think is really important.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because kids really don't have a frame of reference. So they don't know that not everybody they're friends with is going to be their friend for the rest of their life.
Right.
Right? They don't understand that this is not everything always forever. We can see it and say, well, these are your friends now, and chances are in a few years it might be different. Maybe not, but
Yeah.
often is. But
Yeah.
it's something they don't understand. So giving them permission to see who they are in relationship to their group.
Right. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, of just that fluidity and that flexibility, teaching that at a young age, I think is great, because then they won't be as devastated if, let's say, their friend that they had last year isn't their friend again this year. They'll be able to build on that resilience to make new friends and not let it devastate them. It still might hurt, and then we go back to the validation and making sure that they feel, loved and so forth, and having compassion for that, but then just letting them know that life is full of flexibility and fluidity, and that things will change. That's a given. And for them to accept that and move on from that if something does come up like that.
Yeah, it's powerful. Not always easy, but powerful.
No, it's not always easy. That
Especially
is true.
before we move into our rapid fire questions. Because I hear this from parents in my community a lot, that parents are worried if their kid only has one friend or two friends, right? Or maybe they only have one activity or one club.
Yeah.
And, you know, either parents who are very social, parents who are worried, like there are a lot of reasons why parents might not see that as good enough.
Hmm.
So, how do you know what can parents look for to understand when what their kids got is enough and when they need to be intervening?
I always have the mentality of, it only just takes one friend to feel like you have a sense of belonging. And every child is going to be different. There is no cookie cutter scenario that a children should be this or should be that. And I'll give you a quick example. This even happened to me and my own son. I'll just, share the story because I think other parents can relate to it. I'm a very extroverted social being. The more friends I have, the more I feel alive. I can go and talk all day, and I get invigorated by it. And I was always someone who felt like I needed a lot of friends, to function. And my son is very much like my husband. They're very introverted, and usually typically have just one or two friends. And so the other day, actually it was about a year ago, and my son came home and he was telling my daughter, she was asking about who he hung out with at lunch that day, or who'd you hang out with at recess? And he said, oh, I didn't hang out with anybody. He was very just nonchalant about it, very just confident in his answer. Well, I didn't hang out with anyone today. I just walked around the playground by myself. And my daughter and I looked at each other like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? I'm a failing as a mother. Like, he has no friends. No one likes him. He doesn't like anyone. Like, what's happening? Should I call his teacher? And I went into that mode of, oh no, like I felt bad. And then my husband overheard, and he walks over later, not in front of the kids, but he said, well, he probably got really overstimulated at school and needed that alone time to recharge. He goes, that's how I am. And it just kind of just shifted my mindset of, sometimes kids do need breaks. Sometimes being around a lot of kids is very overstimulating and overwhelming for them. And sometimes having one or two kids is really what feeds them, without that extra pressure. And so, just meeting your kids where they're at is my biggest piece of advice. Meeting them where they're at, based on their personality, based on their temperament, and based on what they need. They may only need one friend, and they're the happiest kid on the block, even though you might need all the friends and all the attention, and your kids may not. So just knowing they're going to be different, possibly, and then meeting them where they're at is the most important.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Was an adult before I realized that I was an introvert playing an extrovert because I thought that's what you had to do to be social. And so I
Right.
spent a lot of years exhausting myself.
Yes.
Um, because that was the message, is that it had to be more. My mom's an extrovert, it had to be more. And it didn't actually. Less was more.
Yes.
And but I was a grown adult before I figured that out. So if we can give our kids an opportunity to choose and to understand themselves well enough to make those choices, that's a really powerful gift.
Yes. Very much.
Okay, a few rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. What's one thing parents hate admitting about play, but every parent feels?
Ooh, that they don't want to do it. A lot of parents feel uncomfortable playing and don't want to do it, or would rather do everything but. And I think they don't want to admit that, but sometimes I think we all, at moments when our child says, "Mom, will you play with me?" We say, "Oh, here we go again," and we got to hype ourselves up for it. It happens to all of us, so it's normal. It's okay. Don't feel guilty.
Have you ever read the book from the of Play called the different play styles?
Oh,
There's
I no, it's not familiar.
I'll share it with you afterwards, but
Please.
there's this interesting research done on different play styles. And when you begin to understand your play styles, you can find ways to play with your kids that might be a little less exhausting.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, when your child completely rejected your therapy, when has your child completely rejected your personal therapy tricks?
Ooh, like my children and when I try okay. Uh, well, sometimes they know because 'cause I've used it over like you said, we can't always use things over and over and over because our kids are smart and they catch on. And they might say, "Well, mom, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to use this intervention or whatever." And so sometimes they'll reject it, especially when they know I'm trying to get them to do something like a chore specifically. I know you're just trying to get me to clean my room. So sometimes they kind of roll their eyes a little bit and I'm not one of your clients, mom. I'll hear that sometimes. So every once in a while I'll get that, but then every once in a while too I'll get them to say, "Mom, can you do that one thing with me? That one play based technique that you used?" For whatever the case is, and they like it and they want me to do more of it. So it's definitely,
Awesome.
yeah.
I love that. One of my kids said to me once, "You're saying yes and, but you really mean no."
Oh, said they're so smart. They can see right through it sometimes. We think we're very savvy and, they see right through it. They're very, very smart.
Right, what's the one thing your kids know about you that your clients never could?
That I make mistakes. I think I try to come across as, the parenting expert, the one that has all the answers, the one that know because I feel like if the parent or the child that I'm working with see through that I may not know the answer, that I may not have the answer, that they'll see me as someone who's not competent and therefore that discredits my degree, that discredits my career, right? And so I don't let my guard down very much. If I don't know an answer to a question, I'll say, that's a great question. Let me get back to you on it. And that's kind of my go-to. And then I'll say, I think I need to do a little more research on that. I'll let you know at the next session. And then I, research the heck out of it. But my parent or my children know that I'm not perfect because I'm certainly not perfect and I don't have all the answers. And I think I let my guard down more when I'm with my kids. If I make a mistake, I'll say I'm sorry, and they learn that it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay not to be perfect, and so I really make sure that they know that about me.
Fabulous. If your kids could describe playing with mom in one sentence, what do you think they'd say?
Ooh, I should have asked them before the interview what they would say so I could give you an exact answer. But the one thing that I know I hear constantly from my kids is that I'm always that I love them and I'm always there for them, and no matter what. And that also means that. And I think my son even said this today because he's my son who always like, "Mom, look, mom, I want to show you this. Mom, I want to one more thing." And I'm kind of trying to do other things, and he keeps interrupting, saying, "No, one more thing I want to show you." And usually I'll just take a deep breath if I'm starting to get a little frustrated of, okay, I have to move on and do other things, but that I'll always make time for them. And that I think he has mentioned that I know you don't really want to see this right now, but you always will. And I think I love that they know that no matter what, even if I'm busy and have a deadline I'm working on or whatever the case may be, if I can make it work, they're always my number one and I'll always, put them first.
Beautiful. Is there anything, something particularly beautiful that you've seen happen in play that it's really hard to capture in words, but there's this essence of it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that could be a whole, interview and just for that question. Um, The reason I love working with children so much and through play is because I actually can see the agency of change. When I used to work with adults, uh, sometimes I just didn't see the change. There was a lot of resistance, and with kids, they want to change. They are moldable to change. Like, they have resilience to change, and it's so beautiful that when a client comes to me and they're having XYZ issue, and then, even weeks, months later, that issue is eliminated, and you see that change happen just through play. You just see the dynamics of how play works, and the beautiful changes in confidence it gives children. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. It is hard to put in words, but just when you see it, it makes you feel like, okay, this is really a valuable mechanism to do with our children, and it's definitely undervalued, and we don't play enough. And I think that if we just had play lead the way a little bit more, we would see a deeper connection with our children, better communication, and more positive behavior if we just let play lead the way.
Sure. All right, we're going to wrap this final question. Is someone asked you why this summit stands out from other ADHD conversations? What would you tell them?
I love this conversation because not only does it focus on neurodiversity, which I think is definitely not talked about enough in this world and in the society. And I think not just the idea of feeling, for parents to feel a sense of normalcy, for parents to feel like they're being seen, that they're being heard if they do have a neurodiverse child, and being able to not only accept that in themselves, but also have teach their children to have acceptance for it, and for our society to have more acceptance. um, I I feel like it's definitely a subject that isn't talked about enough, and I think with this summit specifically, it really hones in on it and really focuses on that specifically. And I think there's so much value in that, because, like I said, there's not enough conversations around it. I think a lot of parents are feeling very alone and isolated, and this, I think, hopefully will help them have feel like they have a little more support if they're raising a child with ADHD.
Beautiful. Dr. Kim, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Are you loving the advice and insights you're getting? Well, you can get lifetime access to all the summit session when you upgrade your ticket to the VIP pass. This means you're not only getting unlimited access to the sessions, you will also unlock the audio version of the entire summit, expert action blueprint with key takeaways and action steps, English subtitles, and a brilliant workbook that will help you implement everything that you get. You see, the VIP Pass is purposely designed to help you digest all of the content from the summit and implement this advice in your own life. And as you know, the internet is flooded with advice about ADHD. But how much of it actually comes from credible sources? How many times have you been led astray by unknown or unverified advice? Well, unlimited access to the entire summit is a place where information is not only just abundant, it's also trustworthy. So if you want to be confident in the ADHD strategies every step of the way, then I think this is a place to start. I'm totally positive that you're gonna love the VIP Pass and all of the valuable resources that we have created for you. It's like having a personal library of expert knowledge right in your pocket. And here's the best part. If for any reason at all you don't love it, we'll refund you in full. No questions asked. So you really have nothing to lose. Grab your VIP Pass now and don't miss this opportunity.